Qatar is a small country. It is a piece of land in the Persian Gulf. It is next to the big country Saudi Arabia. Qatar is not big in size. It also has a small number of people who are citizens of Qatar. There are about 320,000 Qatari citizens. Many other people live and work in Qatar, but they are not citizens. Despite its small size and small number of citizens, Qatar is very important in the world today. This is surprising. Most small countries do not have much power outside their area, but Qatar is different. It has big power and influence globally. Qatar is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It has a lot of money. This money comes from things found under its land and sea. We will learn about this later. Qatar uses its money in different ways. It saves a lot of money in a special fund. This fund has billions of dollars. Qatar also buys parts of big companies and buildings in other countries. This gives Qatar more power. For example, Qatar owns a famous football team called Paris Saint-Germain. It owns parts of famous buildings in London, like the Shard, a very tall building. It also owns a famous store called Harrods. It even owns a part of Heathrow Airport, a very busy airport in London. Qatar also has a big airline called Qatar Airways. People around the world know this airline. It also has Al Jazeera, a large news channel that people watch in many countries. Recently, Qatar hosted the FIFA World Cup. This is the biggest football event in the world. Qatar is the smallest country ever to host it. This shows Qatar's power and ability to do big things on the world stage. Qatar has become a global player. It has great wealth and uses it to have influence. It is amazing to see how this small country, a piece of desert land, became so rich and powerful. How did Qatar become so important in the world? We will find out in this story. 2. A poor land. For many, many years, Qatar was a very poor country. It was a small piece of land, a peninsula that went out into the sea. The land was mostly flat and covered in hot, dry desert sand. Living here was very hard. The desert made life difficult. There was not much good land where people could grow food. Water was also a big problem. It rained very little, and there were no rivers in the country to provide fresh water. Because of the harsh land, people had only a few ways to earn money. The main jobs were fishing in the waters nearby. People also went diving deep into the sea to find pearls. This was dangerous and not always successful work. Life was simple and did not change much for hundreds, even thousands of years. Very few people lived in Qatar because it was so hard to survive there. The country stayed far away from other parts of the world. It was isolated and not developed. Most people in other countries did not even know about this small desert land. Qatar was largely unknown to the rest of the world for a very long time, a forgotten place with a difficult life for its few people. 3. Finding oil. In the year 1939, something very important happened in Qatar. People discovered oil for the first time. They found it in a place called Dukhan, located on the western part of the peninsula. This discovery was a big moment, marking the start of a potential change for the small country. However, the world was about to enter a difficult period. The same year, 1939, World War II began. This major global conflict caused delays. Because of the war, the work to take the oil out of the ground could not begin immediately. It took several years for things to become stable again. Oil production in Qatar finally started in the 1950s. From the Dukhan field, Qatar began to get some oil. This brought some wealth to the country, more than it had before. It was the first big step away from being a very poor land depending only on fishing and pearls. But when they compared the oil found in Qatar to the amounts found in neighboring countries, it was clear that Qatar's reserves were much smaller. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait had discovered giant oil fields. The biggest field in Saudi Arabia alone had nearly twice the amount of oil as all of Qatar. Qatar continued looking for more oil. They searched on the land across the peninsula, but they did not find any other large oil fields. So companies started to look for oil under the sea, in the waters near Qatar's coast. They found some offshore oil fields, but again, these were not huge discoveries like those made by Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. Later, it was known that Qatar had the 14th largest amount of oil in the world. This was a good asset, but in the context of the Gulf region, its oil was still fairly small. For example, it had about 1/4 of the oil reserves found in Kuwait and only about 1/10 of the reserves in Saudi Arabia. Qatar realized that only having this amount of oil would not make them as rich and powerful as their neighbors. They wanted to find something bigger. So the country kept searching for more valuable resources to help build a better future. 4. The big gas find. After finding some oil, Qatar continued to look for more resources. They searched on the land and also under the sea. In 1971, they made a very important discovery. It was not oil but something else, natural gas. This gas was found under the sea in a place that became known as the North Field. This area held a massive amount of natural gas. People said it was one of the biggest gas fields ever found anywhere in the world. It was shared partly with a neighboring country, but Qatar had a very large share of it. A company called Shell helped Qatar find this huge field of gas. When the discovery was made, many people felt a little disappointed. They had hoped to find more oil. Oil was easy to sell and transport. You could put oil into tanks and send it on ships to different countries around the world easily. But gas was different. Natural gas is a gas, not a liquid. This meant it needed a lot of space to transport. Trying to send large amounts of gas in ships across the ocean was very difficult in the 1970s. It was not an easy way to make money. There was a new idea for moving gas over long distances. It was called liquefied natural gas, or LNG. This process changed natural gas into a liquid by making it very, very cold. When gas becomes a liquid, it takes up much less room. This meant special ships could carry a lot more energy if they carried liquid gas instead of normal gas. So LNG technology seemed like a good way to transport the gas from the North Field. However, using LNG was very new and very expensive in the 1970s. It needed complicated and costly buildings and machines. You needed special plants at the start to cool the gas down to a liquid state. This needed a lot of energy and technology. Then you needed special ships, called tankers, that were built to keep the liquid gas very cold during the long journey across the sea. Finally, you needed more special plants at the other end to turn the liquid gas back into normal gas that people could use. Building all of this infrastructure cost a huge amount of money, billions of dollars, before any gas could even be sold. At the same time, there was not a big market for this expensive liquid gas. Most countries that needed gas got it in cheaper ways, often through pipes. In Europe, for example, countries got gas from nearby nations through large pipelines. The main countries that might want LNG were island nations far away that could not get gas by pipes, like Japan and later South Korea, and Taiwan in East Asia. But the market there was still quite small compared to how much gas was in the North Field. Because using the North Field gas required so much money for new technology and infrastructure, and because the market for LNG was small and expensive at that time, Qatar made a decision. They decided not to develop the huge gas field right away. It seemed too difficult and too costly. Finding the world's largest gas field was a big event, but for many years after 1971, it did not change Qatar's situation much. The country continued to rely mostly on its smaller oil reserves. The potential of the North Field stayed locked under the sea, waiting for a better time. 5. Gas becomes gold. The price of oil fell a lot in 1986, more than half. This was a difficult time for Qatar because the country depended heavily on selling oil for its money. The sharp drop in oil prices caused economic problems. It showed Qatar that relying only on oil was risky. They needed a stronger plan for the future and other ways to make money. In the 1990s, oil prices were still low compared to the past. Qatar's leaders began to think again about the huge natural gas field they had found years before. At the same time, countries around the world started to need more natural gas. Natural gas was seen as a cleaner fuel source than coal or oil. It produces less pollution when burned, which was important for countries that worried about the environment and air quality. This growing global demand made natural gas more valuable. Also, important progress was made in the technology needed to handle natural gas. The process to turn natural gas into a liquid, called liquefied natural gas or LNG, became more efficient and less expensive over the 20 years since the gas field was found. People learned how to build the special cooling factories and the large ships needed to carry LNG across long distances. While still costly, it was now a practical way to export gas from Qatar. A major change in leadership happened in 1995. Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani became the new ruler of Qatar. He had a clear and strong idea for the country's future. He saw the huge potential in the North Field gas reserves and believed that investing heavily in the growing LNG business was the key to making Qatar rich and powerful. Under his leadership, Qatar decided to develop the massive gas field. They worked together with big international energy companies, such as ExxonMobil. These partnerships brought in billions of dollars in investment and valuable technical knowledge. Qatar and its partners put a lot of money and effort into building the infrastructure needed for LNG production and export. They built a very large industrial city and port called Ras Laffan on the coast. This city became the main place for processing and shipping the gas. Here, The gas was cooled to a very low temperature to become a liquid. They also commissioned large, specially built ships called LNG tankers, designed to keep the liquid gas cold during long journeys to other countries. In the year 1996, the first ships carrying Qatari LNG left the port, sailing to global markets. This was the start of Qatar's new journey. With the enormous supply from the North Field and the new, advanced facilities, Qatar quickly increased how much LNG it could produce and sell. They built more production units and sent more ships. Other countries that produced LNG at the time could not match Qatar's speed, size, and cost-effectiveness. Qatar quickly rose in the global market. In only 10 years, by the year 2006, Qatar had become the largest exporter of LNG in the entire world, selling more liquid natural gas than any other nation. The huge amounts of money coming from these gas sales flowed into Qatar. The country's wealth grew incredibly fast, faster than almost anyone could have imagined. This new wealth transformed Qatar. It gave the small country the financial power it needed to invest in many other areas and gain significant influence on the world stage. By the 2010s, gas and oil sales were the main source of income for the Qatari government and the country's economy. 6. Spending the money. Qatar suddenly had a lot of money from selling gas. But the leaders knew this money might not last forever. They did not want to depend only on gas, so they started a plan to use the money in smart ways. The goal was to make Qatar strong and important in the world, not just because of its gas. One big step was starting an airline. In the early 1990s, Qatar began Qatar Airways. With money from gas, the airline grew very fast. Today, Qatar Airways is one of the biggest airlines in the world. Its planes fly to many countries, helping to connect Qatar to the rest of the world and bringing people and business there. Another important idea was to save and invest the gas money. In 2005, Qatar created the Qatar Investment Authority. This is a special fund that takes money from the government and invests it in different things around the world. It is like a big savings account for the country's future. This fund bought parts of large companies, famous buildings, and other valuable things in many countries. For example, it invested in car companies and owned famous stores and buildings in cities like London. This made Qatar a major player in the global economy, earning money from outside the gas business. Qatar also wanted to have a voice in the world. In 1996, the same year it started sending gas shipments, Qatar launched a news channel called Al Jazeera. This channel broadcasts news in Arabic and English to millions of people globally. Al Jazeera became very well known and had a strong influence as an international news network. It helped to share Qatar's perspective and increased its visibility on the world stage. Beyond business and media, Qatar worked to build strong friends in other countries. A very important friend became the United States of America. Qatar wanted safety in a difficult area of the world. So Qatar allowed the U.S. military to build a large base in the country. This base is called Al Udeid. It became a main place for the U.S. military in the Middle East. Having the U.S. military base gave Qatar security and also made its relationship with the United States very strong. This friendship was important for Qatar's safety and its place in the world. Through these actions, starting a global airline, investing money around the world, creating a major news network, and making strong friends like the United States, Qatar used its gas wealth to become much more than just a gas-producing country. It became a country with power and influence on the global map. 7. Problems and power. Qatar's small number of citizens caused a challenge. They needed many workers for building and for the gas industry. Millions of foreign workers came to the country. Most people living in Qatar today are not citizens. They came mainly from countries in Asia like India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. This large number of foreign workers created problems. Many reports have talked about bad treatment of these workers. There were stories of poor working conditions and low pay. Some people even described it as modern slavery. Workers sometimes had their passports taken away. This made it hard or impossible for them to leave. These issues were especially visible when Qatar prepared to host the World Cup. Building big stadiums and other structures needed many workers. Sad reports said that thousands of workers died during this building work. This part of Qatar's rapid growth is seen as a serious problem. Also, Qatar faced more competition in selling its main product, LNG. Other countries started to export a lot of LNG. Australia became the biggest exporter for a while. The United States also started sending much more LNG to the world market. This meant Qatar had to work harder to keep its customers. But Qatar had a plan. It decided to build more facilities to make even more LNG. They started a big project to increase how much gas they could export. Then, something major happened in the world. In 2022, Russia started a war in Ukraine. Because of this war, many countries in Europe stopped buying gas from Russia. Europe suddenly needed a lot of gas from other places. This situation was very good for Qatar. It opened a huge new market for Qatari LNG in Europe. Now, Qatar can sell much more of its gas to Europe, adding to its buyers in Asia. This helps Qatar continue to be a major energy seller. However, Qatar's place in the Middle East is complex. It is a small country next to bigger neighbors. Qatar shares the world's largest gas field with Iran. So Qatar needs to have some connection with Iran to manage the gas. But Saudi Arabia sees Iran as its main enemy. This puts Qatar in a difficult position between its neighbors. Qatar and Saudi Arabia also had different ideas about the politics of the region. They supported different groups in different countries. Saudi Arabia and some other nearby countries became very unhappy with Qatar. In 2017, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt decided to cut ties with Qatar. They stopped all travel and trade by land, sea, and air. This was called a blockade. It caused problems for Qatar, like getting food, and for its airline, Qatar Airways. These countries made demands, like Qatar changing its foreign policy and closing Al Jazeera. Qatar refused to agree to these demands. The blockade lasted for about 3.5 years. It finally ended in 2021. The United States, which is friends with both Qatar and Saudi Arabia, encouraged them to solve the problem. 8. Qatar today and tomorrow. Qatar is a small country that changed greatly in a short time. It went from a poor place to a very rich and powerful one. This happened mostly because of its large natural gas fields. This fast change brought many good things. The country became very wealthy. It built modern cities and important businesses like a big airline and a global news channel. Qatar also made friends with many countries and became important in the world. But there were also problems. Building everything needed many workers from other countries. There were sad reports about how some of these workers were treated. This is a difficult part of Qatar's story. Today, Qatar is strong. It has a lot of money from selling natural gas. It uses this money to invest all over the world. It is also a big player in international talks. Its location and gas make it important to many nations. Looking to the future, Qatar still has a lot of gas. It plans to sell even more. But other countries are selling gas too, so there is competition. Qatar also wants to find new ways to make money, not just from gas. It needs to keep investing and building for the time when gas may not be so important. Qatar's journey has been amazing. What do you think is the biggest challenge for Qatar in the future?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.